morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about...
6th edition D&D.
It hasn't actually come out yet, but...
Right, but there's a lot of rumors going around, and even WoTC themselves have come out and talked about it, at least people involved with WoTC.
Yeah, they officially talked about it.
Okay, officially talked about it. Okay. So there's always, for a long while, I would say for the past years, there's been speculation since D&D at the time was turning 7 years old. And a lot of editions.
I thought it was the 50th anniversary.
The 50th anniversary of D&D, but the edition is going to be 7 years old last year.
I thought you said 70, sorry.
No, 7th anniversary. A lot of people have looked at the past of how editions been rolled out, what's the difference in time between one edition to the other, and there really hasn't been any like set day like every 5 years. But people like looking at the past to try to make those kind of speculations. What is it? 7 years now, going on 6. In fact, in April.
It is April.
Yeah, but in April of 2014 is when the first printing of D&D 5th edition was rolled out.
Okay.
So at this point, it's 8 years old. So I think WoTC said in 2024 is when the next edition is going to be published.
For their 50th year. The 50th year of Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow. So that would make it, you're right, because 1974. So that would make it 10 years old. The edition would be 10 years old.
The most interesting thing when I was looking at stuff about this was that one of the Wizards of the Coast people said that some people have never seen, have never played anything but 5th edition.
Right.
And it's the most people that have played Dungeons and Dragons haven't had a new edition. So they want to make sure that the new edition isn't going to be too different because that might put them off, I guess.
Well, that's an interesting statistic. I guess they put out a lot of surveys, and I forget what the number is, but it's kind of sounds like 65% or something like that of people who are playing D&D. At least the people who filled out the survey. Remember, we remind you.
That's just a test subject. I mean, subjects. It's a sampling.
You're right. That they've only played 5th edition, and so and rightfully so. WoTC says a lot of people have never gone through an edition change. Everybody has had, depending on when you started playing, has had that edition change. Everybody's
not as old as you.
Right, that's true. But there has been a lot of people who, well, not a lot of people. Everybody has a different way of looking at an edition change, I'm guessing, right? Because when we went from original D&D, the little white box with the booklets, it was like AD&D was.
When he
like,
says we, he's not talking about me because I have only seen that.
I'm talking about me, my brother Esteban, and Seth. We progressed to AD&D pretty easily because it was like the rules seemed cooler to us, right?
Because it was new.
Well, there's that too. There's that new.
I'm not so sure why. I'm not totally sure what the concern is about the players facing a new edition, because all the gamers I know, and there's a wide range of them, they love new editions. If only to buy the book and see what's different.
Well, you're right. But I think WoTC being a little bit concerned about the 5th edition people who have only played 5th edition, it's a totally different group of people. They don't usually...
they're younger. This is the first time they've been introduced to role-playing maybe and things like that, is what you're thinking. And
I don't know. It's a different type of gamer, I think. You know what I mean? I
don't know what that means.
I mean, okay, so I hate to use these terms, but I think me, my brother, and those gamers that we know, I would consider them hardcore gamers, right? They play board games. They play various role-playing games.
They play every Friday night from now to eternity.
And they have multiple games. But it seems to me like these new people only play D&D. A lot of times these new players have only played D&D. And I think WoTC might be concerned about changing things up too much and disrupting their world, right?
Well, I am going to totally disagree with you on this, because I think that if they've been playing since anywhere between 2014 and now, after a couple years, one of those people in that group will have figured out that there's other role-playing games and discovered that, hey, do you want to try this one? And things like that.
That's true.
Or if they're playing, what do they call it, where you go and you play with a bunch of people, organized play,
right?
Then somebody there is going to tell them that there's other role-playing games.
Yeah, I guess if they go to a hobby game store, they'll see other games there. Or even if they go to, Barnes & Noble, there's other games there. Not a great selection, not a huge selection, but there's other games. There's Call of Cthulhu usually, Shadowrun, some of the biggies. For edition changes, for me, it was, like I said, we liked AD&D. We played, I don't know if there was I don't think there were any supplements like there is nowadays. But there was a lot of modules. They made modules, but actual rule editions. I think at one point they came out with Wilderness Survival or the Dungeoneer's Survival Guide. These are these hardback books, but that's like the only two that I remember of actual hardback books that they put out. They put out a lot of modules and stuff like that, and I don't remember very much else. And I didn't get into second edition because at the time we just kept playing AD&D, and it wasn't until third edition came out that I actually looked at it again and said, hey, I want to play this game, and we started playing third edition. So I can understand why WoTC, people at WoTC are a little bit concerned about these 65% of the people who are playing D&D who have never gone through an edition change might be not wanting to upset the cart too much.
Well, not only is it the edition change, but there's a lot of books out there, 5th edition books.
Yes.
And as a person who looks at my bookshelves that my husband has filled with gaming books, and I'm looking at I don't know, about 11 D&D books over there on that shelf. 5th edition?
Probably. Yeah, there's about at least 10, 11.
And they just came out with the 2 new ones this year. I think I bought one for Augustine, or that was at Christmas. Tasha's
Cauldron?
I think that is the one I got him for Christmas.
Really? I don't know when you bought that one. But we do have it.
Yeah.
I think that was the last book we bought. There's quite a few other books that have come out since.
And that's 10. We have at least 10 sitting there that I can see. 10 times $50 because most of them are $49.99.
You're right.
Some of them might have been $39.99.
Let's just say 50.
But some of them might be a little more depending on what it is.
Right.
But the new edition, it says they're really only going to come out with the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then
the 3 core books
and the Monster Manual.
Monster Manual. So I'm guessing that. Well,
and it says it's backwards compatible, which I'm not sure exactly what that means, but the people that I read about said that means that you'll be able to use all the stuff from 5th edition, which whether it's backwards compatible or not, I know that I've used your 3.0 books for things like Eberron. Was it Eberron?
I think it was Forgotten Realms.
Forgotten Realms, different ones.
Right. Well, it depends on what do you mean by backwards compatible, right? There's different levels of compatibility. When you go back and play or pull out, let's say you pull out an adventure from 3.0 and use it for 5th edition. Sure, the monsters, the descriptions and the actions and stuff and all the events can still take place because it doesn't require rules. But the monsters themselves, I'm sure, have changed.
Are different. Yeah.
Right. So how much of it is backward really compatible? And I think you could probably use...
I don't know. I used the 3.0 rule, the monsters. I just used their abilities and stuff. And I didn't even look them up in 5th edition.
Right.
And nobody at the table complained.
And nobody knew. Right? There was no... Except when they get to what is it? Like stats of the monsters on their attack, right? Because they get... Oh, no, because they get a plus something just like you would, right?
And none of them questioned me, which is... They always question me, so... Are you sure the monster can do that?
Well, I got that from people who even though we're playing the same edition or whatever. So I think there's a lot of stuff that can come out of a lot of changes that can come out in 6th edition. But what's interesting is you're right, is that they're continually putting out 5th edition books. And I think they're on track to put out at least three or four books this year. I forget what the names. I don't really remember the names of them. And just 2023 because D&D 6th edition isn't coming out supposedly till 2024, and they're still making books for.
And you're not even sure if they're going to call it 6th edition because
That's
a lot of
true.
the people that I read were saying that maybe it's going to be called 5.5. But then they were also saying that if so many people haven't gone through an edition change yet, they might not call it 5.5 because that might confuse people.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And that's another thing I think is that a lot of the talk and a lot of the little bit information that we do have from WoTC is that it's not going to be a full edition change. It's going to be like an update in the rules and not really change a lot of things. Though I think the amount of stuff that they're changing, it probably deserves its own edition. For example, they're going to, one of the things that they speculate, now this is speculation, because of the changes they're making to the classes and to the monsters, is alignment. They're going to get rid of alignment. And I've talked about that.
That's just a speculation.
That's a speculation. I've had that speculation since.
Well, people have been talking about that. It's one of the things that it seems like it's old school versus the newer players don't always understand what alignment is. Or
right.
When you explain it to them, they go, "Oh, it doesn't really mean a lot." But it was a way to get people to play their character a certain way. Like if you're not playing it, if you're playing a paladin and you're going around killing people without holy reason, right? Even with a holy reason, maybe you're going to have to go do some penance, right? Because you're not playing with in your alignment. Yeah,
I think it's an interesting alignment. I mean, Gary Gygax probably came up with it from what I know. I don't really know a lot about his personal history. I believe he was, I don't know. So I'm sure it was a game mechanic to help people play the character, but also define who your enemies were and who wasn't your enemy. And declaring all orcs chaotic evil, that just made it easy to go out and kill them because they were evil. Since that time, since 40 years later, almost 50 years later, things have changed a little bit, even, in the mindset of a lot of people in the United States or in the culture of the world that, well, how can a race be evil, right? And then, well, Tolkien had that thing, right? That orcs were created, so therefore they could all be evil. But in the game world, they're alive.
They have villages.
They reproduce and stuff like that. So having the idea that they're all going to be evil, it just seems kind of doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And that's true. Why would what you are make you a certain type of alignment? So I've had a problem with alignment for a long time. When you really think about it, it's like, what does it mean to be chaotic neutral? And what does it mean to be lawful neutral? And how many people in real life have those kinds of commitments to their moral purpose, right? Everybody kind of just is on this, what they call it, spectrum maybe, or they kind of waver one way or another.
That's what I always tell you. I always say you just play chaotic good because most people are inherently good. I mean, there are outliers, but but most people are also chaotic because, you could go, I'm doing everything right, but it's okay to go 10 miles above the speed limit.
Yeah, right.
There's those little things that you're like going, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's nobody here. I can go 10 miles above the speed limit.
Right.
But that's not the law, so you can't play lawful, right? Because you're a little bit chaotic.
Well, I agree. I agree for the most part. And so alignment's probably gone, and that changes races, right? Because now...
Well, it's not gone. When I was reading about it, they were saying that it would be... Instead of the alignment like chaotic good, it would be a typical balance of how a person would behave. So going back, it's more like a lawyer, right? Can you say that this person that a reasonable person would have done this, right?
Oh.
That kind of idea. So a good no, and
confuse me with the lawyer talk.
And what they were saying is maybe they'll go gnomes. Sorry. I always say gnome because I think it sounds better. Gnomes act a certain way, typically.
Right.
And then but then there this person that I was listening to said that, but that doesn't mean that your gnomes can't act a different way.
Right.
So I think that one of the things that the other thing I was reading about this was that the changes make it easier for a new dungeon master or game master to change the way the characters are, the races are written.
Right.
So typically gnomes do this.
Right.
But you're allowed to have your gnomes do however you feel.
However
they
you want to play.
do it.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize that everyone doesn't know Rule 0. That you are allowed to change the world because you are the GM,
or even the rules themselves.
And if you don't like a rule, don't use it. If your table doesn't want to have to roll the second critical, I don't know if that's in D&D. Is that D&D 5th edition?
I don't know if it's officially the rules.
The boys have been going back to Pathfinder and want it there. It has a lot more rules.
Oh yeah.
So, but if your table doesn't want to do that, it's okay. You don't have to, because you are the GM. This is your game. This is your group playing this game. And the goal is for you to have fun, not to. And if you want to if you're a rules as written person and that makes it fun for you, that's one thing. But if your group doesn't like a rule, it's okay to change it. So they were saying that in 5th edition, they want to define that a little more for people, so that newer people that are playing. And if you say 65% of people that took these surveys playing 5th edition, this is the only thing they've ever played,
right,
they might need to define it for them that it is okay. Because it's always been okay, maybe to adjust the rules to make it your game.
Right. I totally agree. I think somewhere in 5th edition, well, maybe some people are just always this way about rules as written, right? I was in a Facebook group. He couldn't take it. I couldn't take the questions. I'm like, come on, just come up with your own idea. And some of them were like really just like small things, I don't remember any question that for certain, but I just remember reading this stuff. I go, why would you even ask that question? It's like, but then if you think about it, if some of these people, the only thing they've played is D&D and 5th edition, and they're looking at this rule book as the rule book.
Well, and that guy was saying that they're looking at these words are the game, and I'm like going, whoa, because I've been playing with guys since I was a teenager, and nobody has ever said that to me, right? They've all thought that this is my game, this is the way we're going to do it, and even if the rule says this, I'm interpreting it this way.
Right, they home house rules.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, house rules.
I've never run into anyone going, this is the way it's written, and this is the way we have to play it.
Well, I think the reason that happened, as for people like me who are older, is that, for example, AD&D, when it came out, had this chart, and you know how you love charts. It had this chart about weapons, and each weapon had a different plus or minus depending on what kind of armor it was up against, because
the person that made that chart really, really liked differences in each one.
Well, yeah, and it literally was pretty cool, because like some weapons were really good against like chainmail and this mail and that mail, and I purposely went and looked at some. I think it was a flail. A flail was really good at everything, and so it would give you a +1, +1, +1, +2, and it had all the armor listed on top, and you would get pluses to hit. So I'm like, wow, and maybe it had a -1 against one of them, like plate mail. But who cares? How many people do you run into have plate mail? I thought it was pretty neat, but we never used that freaking chart because it was too complicated to deal with it.
Well, because when you're in battle, it's hard to look up look at their armor and then go to your chart.
Well, back then they would just tell you the armor class. They would
right.
go, oh, he's wearing chainmail, he's wearing this mail, it's armor class this. And another thing was weapon speed. Each weapon had a different weapon speed as to how fast you could use it. And now I don't even remember why there was a weapon speed thing. If it gave you multiple attacks, or I think it had to do with initiative.
I think that's more realistic, because
yes,
it is. If you're going to pull a two-handed sword off your back,
right,
it's going to take you more than 6 seconds.
Compared to a dagger that's on your hilt, right?
Yeah.
On your belt. And that's exactly what it was. Weapon speed was how fast you can wield it and how hard it is for you to actually try to swing and use the sword. Like a rapier is really quick, whereas two-handed sword, you're making these really long and arduous swings, which because it's just so heavy. Right.
That's why a lot of times the people at the table will, especially older people who've played D&D for a while, will say, in my action, can I pull out my sword and use it?
Yes.
Because they might have come across something like that.
Well, back then it was an action you spend the action to pull your sword.
Well, yeah. Well, you can see why, people might slow down the game, even though it's 6 second intervals.
Well, it wasn't always 6 seconds.
Oh, what was it before?
I think it was
a minute.
I think there were minutes, and then there was turns. So I don't remember. Honestly, I just remember that a round went up and down, and finally came down to 6 seconds in AD&D fifth edition, because I think in original D&D and AD&D in second edition, same thing. A round was like a minute of fighting. So when you roll to hit, it wasn't a single swing of a weapon. It was this dance that you're doing, and after this dance is over for a minute, it's how much damage you've inflicted on the other person. And that's why at the time, Gary Gygax said that hit points was a combination of luck, stamina, actual physical prowess, mental, not mental, but physical health. So it was all this stuff rolled into one, and then it later on became this idea that you're actually swinging and hitting on a single.
Well, then they had to lower the time frame.
Of course, that makes sense. I don't know how do we get off on this discussion, but what I'm saying is that these changes that happen probably won't happen in the sixth edition, whatever.
Because if you think about the changes they made and put into fifth edition for combat, and you just have to roll your D20 to see if you're going to hit or not, right. And there's not charts. Although some people are bringing back charts because they like it, but maybe not in fifth edition.
There's no pluses and minuses.
Are there pluses and minuses?
Well, there is. There's plus to your less plus and minuses.
You get +2 because you.
There's no more of that. No.
Oh, okay.
You get advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah. So it makes it's a little bit easier.
Less mathy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only pluses you get is whatever you get for your skill and your whatever.
It's like when they ask you what your AC is to hit you, then it's already added up on your your character sheet. It tells you if you have armor, you put the number here,
right?
And then you have your actual number
right.
is here. So you don't have to go, oh, well, do I get a +2 for my armor?
So I think sixth edition is going to be a lot more. I think there's going to be less stark changes, like to the rules anyway, because from all the discussions is they really like the base mechanics of fifth edition, right? They like that it's pretty easy. They like that it's not very convoluted, and that it's easy to teach and easy to learn in a certain sense, compared to like third edition where you had. Remember, we just had a discussion that they have they curtailed the skills to much less than they were. They did away with cross-class skills. They did away with. So when you used to play third edition, you had this pool of points to spend, but now I think you only get like 2 or 3 points compared to like 5 or 6 or 7, depending on what class you were. And I think that the bard and the rogue would get a lot of skill points, where a fighter and a sorcerer would get less. And then they had they mashed up a lot of skills together. We were talking about that. Like athletics was, what did you say? Swimming and climbing and
jumping.
I
think as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things they are adjusting in whatever they're going to call it, sixth edition.
Right.
Is they were talking about classes and
races,
roles. No, classes and races.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wrote.
So yeah, they're gonna monkey about with the classes.
Well, and I think that has to do with all those surveys they put out, and always people. And the boys are notorious for telling me this. This is broken, or I don't like the way they should have made it this way, but then they've come out with all those new ones. What is it? Mordekin's Guide.
Yeah, all of them have
new races, new classes. They give you these ideas that people are going, I would love to do this, right?
Right.
And so those are the biggest things that people want. They play these classes and they go, I want it to be tweaked just a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas in reality, all you have to do is say, I would like it to be this way to your GM, right? And see if they'll go for it.
But, like you said, people do like the rules,
yes.
and they don't want to break them. And I think this group of people who play now are a little bit more adherent to the rules than we used to be, because there were some rules that we just didn't abide by, and it was not a big deal. Like I said, that whole weapon speed chart, that whole better to hit against different types of armor. And I don't even know, because I really didn't run D&D. Well, I guess I did run AD&D a little bit, but I never really looked at all the rules. We just went with the rules that we played with, and we never really questioned anything else, and we just never really investigated
Right.
stuff.
Well, because once you play a game, you kind of know the rules, and even if they change stuff a little bit, especially if your group has played for a certain way,
right.
It doesn't really matter what game you're playing or the rules that you're playing. They're going to go with that way, unless all three boys in our group have gotten the books and started reading every single word.
Right.
And then they're going to go, oh no, this is the way that it works in this one, and that kind of thing, right? And they're so excited to tell you about it. You're like, okay.
Yeah, back to what you said, I think you're right. When people they have classes, they have different types of classes, then they have subclasses or whatever. I don't know what to call them, but like, let's say a fighter, but it's this type of fighter, like a guardian fighter.
Oh, dude, you don't even know. I listened to this guy talk about sorcerers and
I like
about
sorcerers.
spells, right? He goes,
Oh.
He was talking about how the 6th edition is going to make the spells much better, because not necessarily the spells, but what spells you can use and where you can use them, and who gets to the different kinds of things, right? And he went into this big thing that I was like, my eyes glazed over.
Yeah, I think I heard the tail end of that, and I had no clue what he was talking
I was
about.
like, okay. It was good though. I mean, for people who are magic users, these are the things that they want. They want more definition to when they can use a spell and different.
Wasn't they saying that they were going to do away with spell list and just have, I think one of the things that kind of woke me up, I was kind of falling asleep last night, is that he was saying that it's going to be like an ability instead of an attack or something like that, right? And that they were going to add more, less attack spells and more environmental spells that affect the environment. And he called it elemental type spells.
Well, you know how the difference between sorcerers and wizards, like wizards, or I don't know which one it is, clerics. Steve always has this list of spells, and he can choose his spells for the day. As a sorcerer, I have spells, right? And I don't have to, and I never liked the idea of having to choose which ones I'm going to use for a day. As a sorcerer, you don't have to do that.
Right.
You just have them, and then you have your slots, and you just do what you want.
Correct.
Within your slot limit, right?
Right, but the mitigating circumstance is that wizards are much more powerful at higher level, because they can throw more spells and they get access to higher level spells quicker, where a sorcerer doesn't. And I always like that, because I always like playing a sorcerer, because I didn't want to have to memorize spells.
That's what I thought.
And then you're like, oh, I got to memorize this spell for today. Now, I don't know if it's...
because Ian always, when he plays a wizard or a warlock or whatever, he wants to have the first watch, so he can sit there and memorize his spells, which I always tell him, well, how can you be watch if you're memorizing your spells?
It's kind of like he's in a sort of a trance, but not really.
Yeah. Whereas a sorcerer, to me, I always thought a sorcerer was better, because you just have the spells, and I can always throw a lightning bolt, right? Or whatever
you have.
Yeah, whatever
you know.
So I don't have to think about it. I can just do it. That's the way I always thought about it. But a lot of people that play magic users they dip more into the minutia, exactly what they can do and how much.
Because they have a lot more spells to play with, and then they have to figure out what they want to do.
Which I always find interesting when you're sitting at the table, right? Which spells should I... every once in a while, Steve goes, well, which ones should I memorize for today? He goes, well... and I'm like going, I don't understand why you should decide what you're going to do, but he wants to know what's going to happen.
Well, that's what you do. Yeah. What are we going to do today? So are we going to go into caves? We're going to the caves, and I want all these spells. But if we're not, we're going to be out in the open. Then I want to call lightning.
Usually, the GM looks at you and goes, "I'm not telling you what's going to happen today,"
because he has no clue, or they don't have any clue. So that was a very interesting. I can only say it was interesting because I didn't understand a lot of it, but I understand that he was saying that there's going to be a lot of spells that aren't attack spells. They're going to be more infected environment and stuff like that. So I thought it was interesting. That I don't know if it's true. It was just his idea that he had.
I think it also had to do with some of the newer books that have come out have different races and classes, and like elemental stuff is like big right now.
Right.
And I think that has to do with the with anime and different kinds of things that people are into.
Honestly. Yeah, I might agree with that. Yes.
One of the other things that about spells in particular, or I'm not sure about spells, but one is that the character creation is going to be a little more flexible.
What does that mean?
That's the way they said it.
Flexible.
As in, which 5th edition is pretty easy to make a character. I was telling Saul when we were talking about this that I found it. I like the way the 5th edition did it. When you get to each class, it tells you if you want to be a fighter, this is an example. And then you go to your race and you have your racial stuff, right?
Right.
And you can put them together and create your character pretty easy.
Yes.
It kind of gives you like a little map how to do it.
Right.
So more flexibility. I think they were talking about things like classes and stuff. Everybody might get a proficiency bonus and something else, or how you pick different things for your
background and stuff.
Yeah,
and traits.
Yeah,
right. Do they have traits in?
I don't think they have traits in D&D.
Yeah,
or they might, but I don't know if you pick them.
We just made Pathfinder characters.
Yes,
that's why
Pathfinder is a lot more.
So sorry, Pathfinders are in our mind because our sons just started a 1st edition Pathfinder game. So
it's always a little bit different when you go from one system to a different system.
Yes. What's funny too is that I actually thought about selling my Pathfinder stuff, I guess.
And then you ended up buying more for him.
Yeah, well, I only wanted to buy the core book because our core book was pretty torn apart.
But you bought 3 books or 4 books.
I bought the little ones, these little pocket-sized ones. I thought they were cute. Of course, I can't read them because the freaking print is sub 5-point font or something. But I thought they're pretty cool.
So that was one of the things they said was that character creation would be a little more flexible.
Wow. Because it's pretty flexible as it is now. I mean, because for me, flexibility was the ability to go to point buy system instead of rolling your 3-6-sided dice and getting stuck with whatever you rolled. That was always good. And then I love the idea of rolling 4d6, picking the best 3, and then there was the crazy one where you get to roll. You basically roll 6 characters, 6 sets of the 6.
That was just ridiculous.
So the point buy system I thought was neat. You start with different amounts of points, or there's the array where you just get those numbers and you just put them wherever you want.
I like either the point buy system or where you roll 4 dice for each stat, and then you take the best 3. Those are the ones that I've done the most.
Right.
But and it gives you a pretty reasonable character if you do a point buy system. I do not understand mini-maxers as well as I should, because like even the new Pathfinder characters that they rolled up, these people have 7 and 8 in their like charisma and stuff, whatever their dump stat is. And I'm like,
literally.
I'm all, really? Because my character is like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? That kind of thing. And it's all in the middle. There's nothing too high, nothing too low, because I don't want any of those things to be like negatives, right? And Alan goes, oh, I have a negative in this, a negative.
Yeah, they're dumb and stupid.
And I'm like, I'm all, really? Really?
They're very unwise and they're not very smart. And it was weird because like I think Ian has a 7.
Yes, in one of them. I'm all, how can you get a 7? It's a point buy system. Aren't you supposed to start with a certain number? I mean, you start with 10. Do you subtract to get down to the 7?
Yes, and you get points back.
That just, see, I wouldn't even think of that. If you start with 10 and that's average, that's where you should stay and go above higher because you get stuff for your class and your race to add stuff to it.
That's
right?
true. That's how you got. Like you're right. I think they made Kathy's character. She has does she have a 20?
I don't know.
She has a 20 and whatever.
I don't know.
I'm like 20.
How did you get that?
And I look at the character. I go, oh jeez, you did the freaking. Not only that, I think Ian has like a 7 and an 8. Well, 7 in the.
But he's playing it like he's dumb. So that's the way. So that's okay.
I think Kathy wanted to be really decent looking. I go, oh, it's a 9. It's actually negative. She goes, oh, and she looked across the table at the people who made
the mini
character.
maxers that made her character.
Yeah.
Well, so character creation is a big thing for people, right? You got
Right.
the people who want to mini max their character so that they can be the best fighter or
Whatever.
wizard or whatever, and then you have people who are going, well, I want everything to be equal for people, so. That kind of thing. So it totally depends on who you're playing with and
Oh yeah.
what kind of people, how they make their characters, right? Whoever you're learning
Or what kind of game you want to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times those those characters that they made for that Pathfinder game, those mini maxers, if it was an investigative game, they'd be useless.
Well, considering the two gnomes are the face people because they have the best intelligence.
So they have
and
charisma
and charisma.
12. I think you're right. Somebody did.
And I'm all really. You want the gnomes to be the people talking first.
Yes. Well, that's not bad.
Yeah, since I'm one of them.
And I'm the other. Okay, so 6th edition. I think it'll be a very interesting thing to see. Once it's come out, I think a lot of people will.
There's one other thing that monsters.
Monsters.
They were talking about the monster challenge ratings.
Oh yeah,
which is a big deal.
Yeah,
it's a big deal to me because I never know. The boys try to explain challenge ratings to me like 20 times, and I'm like going, okay, I don't understand if the monster what the challenge rating means. Is that just how you give out experience points?
Well, it's supposed to gauge. It's supposed to be a gauge of how strong the monster is compared to the party.
Which I look at what they do and how much their damage is, and that's how I gauge it.
Right, and I guess this guy was describing challenge rating and why it was messed up, and for the life of me, my eyes were glazed over.
My eyes were totally glazed.
And I'm like, it's just. I guess, and the biggest complaint is that it was messed up. That the way they calculated this number was just messed up from the beginning because they were using not very good statistics and all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, who cares?
Well, the thing is they make these monsters with challenge ratings, right? But they don't take into consideration how many people are in the party and what they can do, right? So
right.
As the GM, you have to look at the monster and go, well, okay, I know that my fighters do 95 damage on each hit, so either I have to have 6 of these monsters or pick a bigger monster.
I really don't know because what happens is when I pick an encounter and I have a monster, if there is one, I use the challenge rating as a guide of how strong, at least the people who made the rules think this monster is, and that's helpful for me. I'm like, okay, so I know this thing is a challenge rating 5 supposedly, but my players and their characters are very powerful because one, I've talked this before, is monsters have the detriment that I'm running them, right?
Yes, they
and
do.
I'm not an expert in every monster that I put in front of the characters. And if they decide to fight, I am not like an expert in Demon 4 type this, whatever. And so I don't know the nuances of this type of creature. I can read it, I can understand it, but it's a lot different than a player who has built their character and knows the ins and outs of that character and knows their weaknesses and their strengths. And so when you're up against 4, 5, 6 players who are like that, and you're like, oh, I picked this monster last week and I gave it a gloss over, and instead of challenge rating 5, my players are level 4. I think it should be a good monster, and they wipe the floor of a lot of that has to do because my tactics, because I don't know the monster well enough, is the problem. So what I do is I only use the challenge rating as a gauge and not like true to, this is a challenge rating 5. It should be good for the monster, for the characters level 5. bada bing, bada boom. It's going to be a great fight. I know I never think that way. I never have. Even in Pathfinder, when we were playing Pathfinder, I looked at the challenge rating, and I knew that, okay, so this is what they think this challenge rating of this monster is against my players or against people, live people,
real people.
That challenge rating could be up or down depending on how good or how unknowledgeable the players are about their own characters and their own strengths. So I understand challenge rating. I know they want something that's more accurate, but for me, it's not a big deal. And I don't understand the logistics of how they came up with that number. I've never really looked into it.
I think it's hard for people to look at the monster. You shouldn't look at the monsters and go, oh, this is a challenge rating 6. My characters are level 5 right now. They should be able to handle this. When that probably means that monster is not going to last very long because, you got 5 or 6 characters, and especially if they're fighters. So as a GM, you learn these things, right? That this is not this monster.
Right.
But like every once in a while, Saul, he's done things like he picked harpies once to be chasing us when we were playing Pathfinder.
Okay.
And he's in the middle of the battle, he goes, this harpy does the harpy thing where they make the
the noise.
And then he goes, I see him, he's reading, how much damage does that do? And then he got this look on his face like he wasn't expecting it. And then all of a sudden it did like half damage or something because we would all died. It was like 94 hit points or something that it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think it was a heart. It was a banshee.
Oh, okay.
That's
Banshee. Okay. Sometimes your GM picks monsters because they sound cool.
Yeah.
And doesn't realize exactly what they do. And then in the middle of battle, they might go, this is wrong. I shouldn't have picked this. It's just such a such a high.
I was, sometimes I'm not very good at concealing my own shock, and it's always been a problem for me. So obviously, I had just glanced at that monster. I go, wow, this is cool. I'm gonna put it right here, and it was only an encounter that they were gonna bypass. I was thinking, or they could.
It was only outside at night. We weren't chasing it or anything. No. We were just running away, and
you just encountered it.
Yeah.
I was shocked at the amount of damage a banshee did, and I'm like, wow, that would kill everybody. So I decided not to have it do so much damage. I think I have the damage.
Yeah. Which
the sad part is that you guys noticed that I was totally like shocked, and I'm like, oh. But
I don't know if everybody noticed it, but I did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some people may not notice. So I think it's interesting that you're talking about the challenge rating because, like I said, I never really thought about it much. I think some people really like if they really like playing by the rules, and they don't have a lot of experience as a new GM, or even an old GM like me. Like how long have I been GMing and I got that banshee wrong? So a challenge rating does help new people and even old players like me, GMs like me that want to look at something and go, oh, okay, so this is the level of the monster sort of, and it's too high level for my characters to actually defeat. Now, it doesn't mean you can't put them there and can't use them, but unless you've trained your players to look at a monster and say, well, maybe this thing is too tough and run away. Unfortunately, I've made my players too dependent on the idea that they can defeat anything I put in front of them. And for the most part, they do, but sometimes they get in over their heads and they don't
back off.
They don't back off.
Well, because...
So they've slowly learned to do that, though.
Yeah.
They come across dragons and stuff, and they're like...
dragons, hide. People, hide.
And other monsters, too. So they want to deal with. But I think 6th edition is going to be a welcome... I believe it's just going to be like a 5.5 or, what is it? A new, not a completely new edition, but like an update to 5th edition.
One of the people that I read said it's going to be a clarification of some of the rules that people may not agree with or understand.
Yeah.
A clarification to what the classes and stuff like that can do.
I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be, and update as far as, and they've already moving in that direction, like moving away from armor class, moving away from races being evil or certain, and then they're saying, well, what's going to happen is if you're a different race of a player character, that you're going to get a +1 or whatever it is, +2 or -2 to its a stat or whatever. And
which is basically what you get now, right?
I don't know. I haven't really made too many 5th edition characters. I mainly ran games. I don't think have I played with 5th edition.
Yes.
Have I?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I didn't make a character from scratch. I mean, I kind of did, but I think they were 10th levels when I joined the game. So. Yeah. So I look forward to it, but what's even more important is that 5th edition is not dead. I mean, they're going to be pumping out books for 5th edition. Like I said, they're on schedule to make in the next 2 years, they've already put out one early this year.
I think they put out 2 this year.
Right, and there's 2, and then I think they have at least 2 coming.
Yeah.
So, and then 2023 is going to probably mimic that, if not more. So you got between 8 and 10 books coming out before 6th edition even is published in 2024. So there's plenty of stuff to buy for 5th edition. I think what's is going to be interesting is what setting they're going to try to attach, or maybe want to attach to 6th edition, because you always want, that's another one is I think is it will make the game a lot different, is if they come up with a cool setting.
Well, before 6th edition comes out, that guy, one of the people that we were listening to, said that they're going to have 2 older settings and at least 1 new setting coming out this year. So
yeah, I wasn't sure if I agreed with what he said, but
that's what he said. Yeah. I don't know if it's true or not, but
a lot of people were looking at, what is it? Dark Sun is one setting, Dragonlance is another, but I think they're going to wait for Dragonlance because they just settled that deal with the authors, the suit, and they're going to put out a set of 3 novels. That seems like a good fit for 6th edition, even though I've never read any of the novels and I've never played in Dragonlance campaign. A lot of people like it. I'm looking like something really different. I don't know. Dark Sun is pretty weird. It's kind of like a post-apocalyptic D&D setting. That's pretty weird, I guess. But I would like to see something vastly different, like, totally new. Kind of like what Eberron did for 3rd edition.
Well, see, I don't know if that's the way Wizards of the Coast is going to go, though, because if all these people if 65% of the people are new to this,
right,
they might not want to go with something completely different.
Totally weird. Spelljammer.
Whereas all the older gamers are going, yes, come out with something new.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. There's gonna, I would just stay appraised of what's going on with 6th edition and see if there's any survey, because they said a lot of the rule changes are going to be based on surveys. So if any kind of survey comes across your table, your digital tablet, fill it out.
Speaking of digital, supposedly they're supposed to have something digital for 6th edition.
Well, they've bought. Did they buy D&D Beyond?
I have no idea. You said that, but I don't know.
I thought they were already part of that. I think they're definitely going to get really into digital, because WoTC has been very protective about their intellectual property, and you literally cannot buy a PDF of their books legally, right? So I think they might be willing to do that now and change their idea, but I don't know. I don't know if they'll just make PDFs or it'll be like a subscription type service like D&D Beyond.
So there you go.
There you go.
This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.